All right, well, as I mentioned, we are at the start of our 23rd season. And for the previous 22 and a half seasons, we had a different looking set.
We did.
And that was a beautiful set. It did exactly what we needed it to do for 22 years. But season 23 being a big year, we decided to get a new set.
Freshen the look.
And John Lenko is the man behind tearing down the old set and
Had a lot of help.
building the new set.
I had a lot of help.
So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, your role, your everyday role with KCSOS.
So I'm the coordinator of media services and KETN, which means I get to work with the good folks here in KETN to create programming for use throughout Kern County and California.
Which is a lot more than just Do the Math. Do the Math is one simply small part of this whole thing.
It is. We create a lot of video products, a lot of media products for our partners, our agencies that work with us, and departments in the office as well.
And California Streaming is part of that, correct?
Correct. California Streaming is the media library that we get all of our programming from, along with Do the Math.
All right. So as if that's not enough, you decided you wanted to tear down the set and build a new set.
Well, it was time for a new look, and we shopped around and we decided, you know what, the most efficient way to do it might be to do it ourselves. So that's what we did. That way we get exactly what we wanted.
Right, because when somebody else does it, you're like, I thought we talked about this and it didn't quite happen.
Right.
And these things are on a timeline.
Absolutely.
You don't have all the time in the world to
We
do
only
this.
had the months of the off season, so we had to get going right away. So a lot of planning went in before our show ended last season, so we knew what we wanted to do when the time came to construct the new set.
And that, I think, is a little more time than people may realize, the planning behind it before you even start doing it.
Yeah, well, in our case, Mike, it was years. All of the things that were hamstringing us along in the production of the show were little notes in our mind. The other directors of the show, the producers of the show, we all sort of had that mental checklist of if we could change things, how would we change it? A lot of it stayed the same, but we made subtle tweaks and changes that would benefit the flow of the show as we go through the season.
Right, and the show is constantly changing.
It is.
And this
It is. It's evolved a
easily
lot.
adapts to the way the program has shifted over 23 years.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted something flexible that would allow us different areas to work in our studio.
All right, well, the first thing we had to do before we get this beautiful studio is tear down the first one.
Well, that's right.
So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it was more of a deconstruction than it was demolition.
Okay, well,
actually,
I like to say tear down now.
Right, I know you do.
Okay.
But there's the iconic backdrop from our Do the Math set, the main set. There we are deconstructing it. And actually we preserved that. It's in our new guest services area. So we can see the legacy set, but there we see
Right.
some of the pieces being cut down so we could remove them from the office. And some of the pieces got reused, a couple of elements got reused, and the look got recycled. and
Right,
reused.
because I think you want to keep a little bit of it,
Absolutely.
you know, so it's familiar,
Absolutely.
but updated.
Absolutely. The show has a legacy in its look and its style, and we wanted to maintain that, but we wanted to enhance it as well.
Right, because I know the flow of the studio
Right.
is still the same, and there are some elements that you remind you,
Absolutely.
yeah, this is Do the Math.
Absolutely.
But it's a newer Do the Math.
Absolutely.
Which is a little more exciting. I mean, for everybody
yeah,
who works here, I mean, the kids and guests, it's always exciting.
It's an updated look, but if you think back on the show, it's changed a lot, as you said, over the years. It was largely a call-in show, servicing a lot of elementary school and some middle schoolers.
Right.
Now we go all the way up through high schoolers, college students. So we have a little more sophisticated look and a look that reflects the content and the viewers.
Right. So once we had it deconstructed, then we needed to start constructing it.
Right,
All right, so
right.
let's take a look at part of this.
We began in the workshop, and of course, a lot of measurement took place. We had some dimensions to work with in our studio. We're fixed on the size of our studio. So the components that we created had to meet those, and a lot of it is made out of steel. Most all of it's made out of steel. And we, in the workshop, would be cutting that steel, measuring, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
And then it was welded together. And a lot of that was the finish work being done to the welds there, so we got a nice flush fit.
And I can see that you're working on this, and you're the one, so you obviously had some experience before this. This wasn't your first time doing
No,
this.
it wasn't. Fabrication's been a hobby of mine, and as we know, we've done segments about racing, and you can't be a racer without being a fabricator.
Right.
There we are sandblasting the pieces to clean all of the scale and rust off of them before we paint them. All of our pieces here are painted front and back, and in order to get a proper finish to them, we painted all of the pieces there before we brought them into the studio. They were all mocked up out in the workshop, and then brought in to final fit in the studio. But pretty much they came in as finished pieces, each wall. And we did it a wall at a time
So
as
you
we brought it in.
talked a little bit about the sandblasting. There is a high amount of pressure on that.
There is.
Because I know when we were
There is.
talking about doing pressure units, I
Yeah.
wanted somebody doing sandblasting,
yeah,
and we finally had it with you right in your backyard doing this.
That's 125 PSI, and you see the results here. We've got a piece here that we've got half of it blasted and half of it not. And this is the scale and the rust that you see on a piece that comes to you from the steel yard before
Right.
you begin fabricating it. We would grind that off in the areas that we're going to weld it, but it would take an awful lot of time and effort to hand sand or grind all of this when our sandblaster gives us that beautiful smooth finish.
Right, and I mean, they can probably notice a little bit of the texture on the camera,
Yeah.
but when you actually are able to feel that, it's incredible, because
And-
that would take forever.
Totally.
To
And
grind that
the
in.
adhesion of paint to a surface like this that is slightly rough if you feel of it. It looks probably smooth on camera, but it's got a slight roughness
You need
to
a
it.
little bit of that for the paint to adhere.
Absolutely. You want those teeth for that paint to grab onto. So there's nothing better than a freshly blasted surface for adhesion.
All right, and some of the others, you've got some tubular also?
All right, so we use tubular steel, a thin wall tubing that we could easily weld. It would be light but strong. And then we used flat stock as well for a lot of the flat pieces that you see. The angle, the flat, and the tubing allows us to build just about any shape. So you see multiple shapes here. I think it was a total of about 16 or 17 pieces that went
Okay.
into this set. Each one constructed from these basic materials. Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah, that is a rule that anybody
Measure
that builds
twice,
anything always
cut
knows.
once. Yeah,
And finally, there's a lot of brick in here.
there is.
And
there
there
is.
was before,
There
but
was.
there's a little bit of difference in the brick.
There is. A brick was a component that was in our old set and one that we brought into our new set as well. But the brick we were using before was a sort of a two-dimensional product. There we are with the new product that we used, and it's actually an extruded product that you can easily cut. It's not made of stone, it's made of foam, actually. And so it's easy to cut and put that foam pieces, those pieces interlocked together. And you simply sort of snap into place, you set some screws in them, and you can actually put up a wall pretty quickly. The way that the piece is extruded gives us some very nice lighting effects as well. So they're a little trim to get it squared and true. Mackenzie and I, in one afternoon, producer Mackenzie and I put up that entire wall in pretty much one afternoon. So she was the
Nice little
supervisor.
puzzle, huh?
She was the supervisor, yeah. Yes, and it is a bit of puzzle pieces, but again, you mock it up and then screws and the blind elements of the piece lock it together. And then a little caulking fills up the gaps in between. And for all the world, people walk in and look at it and think, boy, you took the time to lay that brick? Well, no, we
Right.
actually just put it together. So
Yeah, see, because the one that was here,
this
right,
was our original set, piece of it, and you can see it's a real two-dimensional look. The light really doesn't play off of it very strongly. We knew lighting was going to be a big part of this, so you contrast it with the new piece, and we see the way that the light plays off of that three-dimension, the way it's extruded. It's a much more realistic piece. And with standard definition cameras, again, 23 years ago, this piece played fine.
Right.
It looked fine on
And
camera.
I was going to say, just turn that a little bit so maybe they could see the foam
Yeah.
on the,
Oh,
on
thank
the
you. Yeah.
edge, right? Because you were able
Right.
to saw through that pretty
Right.
easily.
And yeah, it's a soft foam product.
Right,
It
but
really
when
shapes
people
very
look at it,
nicely.
that's the illusion of the texture.
Absolutely.
Right, thinking, oh, that's a lot of brick there
Absolutely.
and stuff like that. Well,
Right,
it's
so,
foam.
and with high definition, you really see this and it really reads on camera, so.
Well, you know what? I mean, we had our open house a little while ago, and all of the guests that came in, I mean, overwhelmed with how
you.
awesome the set looks.
Yeah.
And during the year, you'll be able to see different aspects of it as we're moving around the
bet.
studio and things like that. And it's not even finished yet.
It's
I mean,
a
we're just
work
about,
in progress.
we've got a little
Work
bit
in
more
progress.
coming and stuff like that.
Some more surprises
But
on the way.
a big thanks, John. I
Thank
mean,
you,
that's
Mike.
a lot of work right there.
Thank you.
That was something to keep you busy over the summer, keep you out of trouble, right?
Yeah, that's what I needed in the long hot summer.
All right.
Perfect.
You know what? Right now, we're going to go back. We're going to visit.